The words Double V campaign may sound familiar to some and unfamiliar to others, but it is a part of U.S. history that has long been overlooked in favor of other World War II conversations. So what was the Double V campaign, and how did it affect and impact the civil rights movement that we know and learn about today? African Americans have been fighting for equal rights in this country since at least the 18th century. In the different wars waged in and on this country, African Americans have always been involved, yet the government made many refusals to acknowledge them and their roles in these conflicts. This rejection often led to an entire population feeling like their governing body viewed them as disposable. In 1917, President Woodrow Wilson claimed that World War I would make the world safe for democracy. Yet African American soldiers, veterans, and civilians realized most Americans had little interest in extending equal freedoms to them. When the nation entered another global war for freedom in 1941, African Americans began to campaign for equal rights. They critiqued the government and their fellow citizens for condemning Hitler's treatment of the Jewish population in Europe, while ignoring or even embracing Jim Crow racism within the United States. Some African American newspapers took up the charge of campaigning for equal rights as World War II took off, and more African American men were called forth to fight and die for a country that refused to entertain the idea of fighting for their rights. The press used their position to increase political awareness and activate public opinion in the African American community. This campaign took off in earnest in February of 1942 with an African American newspaper, the Pittsburgh Courier, dubbing the movement the Double V campaign. The Double V was described as the first V for victory over our enemies from without, the second V for victory of our enemies from within, or fighting against fascism abroad and Jim Crow at home. The campaign grew in popularity and became popular amongst many African American communities with a minimum 90% approval rating. The Pittsburgh Courier offered the opportunity to purchase pins, stickers, and patches of the Double V logo, an image of two overlapping Vs with an eagle in the background and the words "Democracy, at home and abroad," displayed proudly. Readers of the newspaper purchased the items to show their support for the Double V campaign and to show the government that African Americans would continue to fight for civil rights even as they fought in the war. As the war waged on, African American activism focused less on protests and more on finding ways to both show their support for the war effort and the fight for equal rights on the home front. Letter-writing campaigns calling out segregation and racist actions of the United States government was one way people participated in the Double V campaign in an indirect manner. The activism shown in World War II was less direct than what came afterwards in the 1950s and 60s, with the sit-in movement and boycotts, because African Americans were trying to show solidarity for the nation at war while still calling out the injustices of their reality. The Double Victory campaign gave a new slogan to a generational fight for civil rights. While the official Double V campaign in the media faded as the war progressed, African Americans across the nation still embraced the spirit of Double Victory. After the war ended with victory abroad, some African Americans continually worked towards victory against racism within the United States. This mindset and the activism it inspired helped lay the foundation for the civil rights movement. Some historians even consider World War II-era civil rights activism and the Double V campaign part of a long civil rights movement.